Hi everyone, I'm Kat and I'm the Outreach and Communications Coordinator for Ontario Streams. At Ontario Streams, our mission is to promote the protection and rehabilitation of Ontario streams, rivers and wetlands through education and community action. One of the ways we work on that mission is through our Atlantic Salmon Classroom Hatchery program, where we raise Atlantic salmon in classrooms with your help, and then we release them out into the wild to support this locally extinct species. Today we've got a video where we will show you how to set up your classroom hatchery. There are a lot of different parts, but I promise we're here to help you get yourself set up for success. So we'll go through step by step the different parts, and then of course you can always reach out to us for any extra support that you might need. To start, you need to be thinking about where you are going to set up your classroom hatchery. Some key considerations is that you want this to be somewhere that is out of the direct sunlight. Though we are going to keep the salmon and their tank covered in insulation, we want to make sure that there's no extra factors of sunlight, extra warmth that are going to be hitting our salmon, just to keep them nice and chilly. We also have to consider, like I said, we've got a lot of equipment that can weigh a lot. Especially once we get this tank filled up, we are going to want a table that is going to be able to support at least 250 pounds. Right, we've got this tank here. Once filled, it would weigh somewhere between 120 to 150 pounds. So once you pick your spot and once that tank is filled, you're not going to want to be moving this to find somewhere better. So let's take the time now to pick a really great spot. And then the last consideration is electrical. We do have a few things that need to be plugged in, and we want to make sure that we're not yanking power cords all over to help reach our little tank set up here. So let's take a look at this piece. This is our chiller. There are two kinds of chillers that you might run into. This video we are going to focus on this Arctica chiller, and if you have another kind of chiller, which is called a coil type chiller, there is another video that you can go check out to learn more about that system. But this is our chiller. On the front we have temperature display, and you can adjust that as needed. This one here, you're going to want to get it set up generally on either side of your tank. That's where it'll fit nicely, just like that. We've got two different little knobs here. One is labeled in and one is labeled out. You'll be able to see this better on your own little chiller, of course. But you want to take note of which one is in and which one is out, and make sure that we know which tube ends we are connecting to which. On our inside, we are going to need a system to actually bring the water out of the tank into our chiller, and this chiller is going to, of course, keep the water cold. So we need to have this constantly circulating to take water out of the tank into the chiller where it gets nice and chilly, and then our other end is going to go and put the water back into our tank. So this here is a mechanical pump, and we are going to want this end to be on the inside because it is going to be taking the water from the tank into the chiller. So we might have different kinds of little fasteners, but they are all fairly similar. So we'll take our tubing, and you might have an elbow on yours. That's just to kind of direct water. So of course we also need a way for the water to get back out of the chiller. So we'll take another hose here, and same situation through our little knob, and then we will plop this into the tank. So now we've got the system where the water will come out of the tank, in through this hose, go through our chiller to keep it cold, and then it will circulate back out into the tank too. Some key things to know about this kind of chiller is that we need to make sure there's nothing touching this chiller. It needs all of these vents here to make sure that it doesn't overheat. So if you put a piece of paper up here, that is like enough to actually stop this from being able to get that fresh air to keep it cool. And if the chiller does overheat, then it can turn off, and then you're going to start to notice that the water is not staying very cold in your tank. So we'll keep that clean. It's a good idea at the beginning of the season to make sure this is nice and clean. This is just a little filter. You just run this under water and let it dry, and then pop it back here to make sure there's no lint blocking our cooling system. And that goes hand in hand with our chiller here is a thermometer. So you might have a style similar to this, and we will plop the one end into the water, and you can have the other piece just sitting over here. You can put it on your chiller or attach it to your tank, and that just makes sure that we are recording that every day or every few days to keep an eye and make sure that we are seeing the same temperature on both the chiller as what it's set to and what we are finding in our tank. The next component we have here is our air pump, and this is used to add more oxygen into our tank. So this is going to be the skinnier, more flexible hose, and you'll also find a little air stone, usually blue, and you will take one end of that air stone that's tapered and stick that into one end of the tube, and then that will go into our tank. And then lastly over here we will attach the other end to the pump. To make sure it's working, we will see a flow of bubbles coming out of this. Of course, right now while we're getting set up, we don't need to have anything plugged in, and we shouldn't have anything plugged in until we have water in our tank. Well, we've got this end in our tank, and then this will just sit outside of the tank beside our chiller here. Sometimes this can get a little bumpy and make some noise, so we'll want to make sure that there's not a whole lot of clutter around here, so that there's nothing that it'll bump into and make noise. So for the other components we've talked about the chiller, which is helping keeping the water cold. We've talked about the air stone, which is adding oxygen. So we've got another component of our life support system here, which is the filter. So for our filter, we want to put it on the back of our tank. Generally, we want to keep some distance between the intake of the filter and all of the pieces for our chiller, just so that we're not causing too much of a commotion, not making too many waves in our tank. There are many different kinds of filters. This is just one pretty standard kind. We've got some actual pieces of filter medium in here, and this will just take water up through here in and water fall back into our tank, which will also help add some oxygen too. One very important thing to note with both of our intakes here, both for the chiller and the filter, is that we want to make sure that we are protecting our little fish that are going to be in our tank. These can be kind of powerful, so we want to make sure that we are adding a little bit layer of protection here so our little friends don't get sucked up. So whether that looks like a piece of mesh or a piece of sponge, something that is going to still let water through, but won't let any of our new little friends get sucked in. So that's one key thing to remember here. You will also need to prime your filter if you have this kind of filter, and that just means that once you have everything else in place and your tank is nice and full, you're going to want to take some of that tank water and pour it into this top until it's overflowing. And that's going to help change the air pressure in the filter, which will then prompt the filter to start collecting water itself through the intake. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. So again, if you need help, just let us know and we're happy to assist you with priming your filter. So we're getting pretty close. Again, let's go through this. We've got our chiller to keep things cold, our air pump to add oxygen, and our filter to keep the water clean. This is most important as we see the eggs start to hatch and we have all those little pieces of eggshell. That's going to help pull all those out. And if we get to a point where we are feeding the fish, again, the filter is going to be able to pull out any loose little pieces of uneaten food. So the last piece of creating our hatchery here is to add some gravel. We are not using too much gravel these days. We are just going to create a little hidey hole space for the salmon rather than covering the entire base of our hatchery. This is still going to provide that much needed space for the baby salmon, the alvin, to be hiding in. So we're just going to put a little bit, and that makes things easier when it comes time to collecting the salmon when they're ready for their release. And since we're not using so much, we do want to kind of concentrate this gravel. Don't spread it all the way out across the tank. Again, we can just create one little space. This is also going to make it easier for your students to find the salmon. Once we do get the salmon, they are going to start in your classroom hatchery in an incubation tray, also called a condo. And we've got all these little squares through here, so each egg will have its own square. And this incubation tray is here to help us prevent the spread of disease or fungus across our eggs. So they will start their life in your tank in this incubation tray, which we'll try to lean up so again the students get a good view. And then as the salmon start to grow and hatch, that's when we'll actually take them out of this tray and then they'll swim down into the gravel. And as I mentioned at the start, we do want to keep these guys in the dark. So we do have some insulation that we use to keep the salmon in nice controlled conditions. You may have to cut your insulation into pieces that fit for your salmon. So let's see. That's perfect. But you get the idea here that we do want them to be surrounded by the insulation. Now, of course, the salmon are in the classroom for the students to see, so you're welcome to take a peek, see what's going on. But for the most part, we do want to keep them in the dark to mimic that the conditions that they would have in the river. They're usually at the bottom of the river, hiding under the rocks, and we want to make sure that they're staying nice and dark, cold, oxygenated water, and clean water. So these are all the different parts of this life support system that we're building here in the school. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to come in and help do a little tutorial and get you started and on the right track here with your salmon hatchery. And we're so excited that you've joined us in this conservation program to help bring back the Atlantic salmon.